Hello and welcome to the Sidebar, presented by True Crime News, taking you inside the courtrooms of high-profile and notorious cases from across the country. I'm your host, Joshua Ritter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer based in Los Angeles and previously an LA County prosecutor for a decade. You can find me on all social at Joshua Ritter ESQ or at joshuaritter.com. We are recording this on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. In this week's episode, a high-profile Hollywood squabble goes into overdrive amid allegations of defamation and sexual harassment, plus an emotional outburst from the alleged victim at the center of ASAP Rocky's felony assault trial. But first, breaking news. As a teen whose fatal shooting of his father was deemed to be self-defense has now been found not guilty of murdering his mother, again arguing self-defense. Today, we are joined by Dina Doll, an attorney and legal analyst you can catch on CNN, News Nation, Law and Crime, and many other outlets. Dina, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
Oh, absolutely. I've been looking forward to this. Some really good stuff for us to dig into today. But the first one, I can't even wait to talk about it because I got to tell you, this happened right before we were about to record that we found out the news about this verdict and my jaw dropped. So I'm curious to hear your reaction to this whole thing, but just to catch everyone up as to what we're talking about. A teen facing charges of first-degree murder and kidnapping in the death of his mother argued self-defense at trial after initially telling 911 that his mother fell on a knife during a long argument. Prosecutors allege Collin Griffith stabbed Catherine Griffith to death while she was trying to bring him home from his grandmother's after the mother and son had a falling out about chores. According to police, this was not the first violent altercation between Griffith and his parents. In November of 2023, the teenager was arrested for domestic violence charges after a previous incident with his mother. And even more shocking, 18 months before the woman's death, Griffith was charged with first-degree murder for the fatal shooting of his father. However, those charges were eventually dropped on the grounds that, quote, prosecutors could not disprove his assertion of self-defense. As Griffith's attorneys presented the teen's self-defense case once again, jurors did hear evidence that the teen previously shot and killed someone in self-defense, but the victim's name and relationship to the defendant was not revealed. Just as we sat down to record this episode, we learned that Collin Griffith was found not guilty of all charges. Wow. Dina, just what is your reaction to this? I know mine. What is yours?
Mine was the same too. It was, how do you kill two people and get away with it with the theory of self-defense? I mean, I was shocked by that because the fact is that they did tell the jury, right? I mean, that was a calculation the judge made in itself. That kind of evidence could have been seen as too prejudicial and not gotten in front of the jury at all. But it did get in front of the jury. Not who the parent was, but to be honest, I almost think that might have made it even more difficult for the jury to overcome. Who was it he was trying to kill in self-defense? Like, so it's shocking for one person to not to kill somebody in self-defense, quote, get away with it, be found not guilty, whatever term you want to use. One time is rare, but he's done it now twice. And as it turns out with both of his parents, and I don't think the fact that the jury knew that it was his father makes a difference. I'm like shocked by this verdict.
Yeah, me too. And, but you make a really valid point that just because someone happened to have been involved in an altercation where they had to use self-defense and someone else died, that doesn't mean that's their one shot, right? And that for the rest of their life, they're never allowed to claim self-defense again. You're right. I mean, it's incredibly rare, but I guess there is a chance that this could happen again. But you would think that jurors would start to be incredibly skeptical to have the same person, who, by the way, it was only 18 months prior, back in court again over the same sort of issue. But so, I can wrangle with all of that. I can wrangle with how the jurors may have handled that. But I'm curious, and you said that you agree with it, or I don't want to put words in mouth, but I'm curious specifically on the idea that they didn't identify the prior person. And the judge made the decision not to let the jurors know that that was his father. To me, that's important information because it's showing kind of an ongoing history of animosity towards his own parents, right? Isn't that important for the jurors to understand what might have been going through his head? It's not like some random guy at a bar. This is his father, and now we're talking about his mother. I don't know. What do you think?
I think you're right. But look at even just saying that, like, it's so, they have that they have to balance. Is it too prejudicial versus probative? Right. And at the end of the day, I do think the judge made the right call. And, what the jury maybe should know is that 1, he's killed before. 2, he's done it and in the act of what he says, self-defense. And so maybe you can take this as with a grain of salt. Like, is he too quick to basically kill somebody, right? Saying it's self-defense. So I think it's important for the jury to know this wasn't somebody who went his whole life and then took this extreme action of killing somebody the one time he thought he was in imminent harm, but he's done it. And like you said, only 18 months. So I think that was important. But when it comes to knowing who it is, I think then it becomes so easy for the jury to convict, to just say, oh, he hates his parents. And I think that's what the judge was trying to avoid was, take his self-defense with maybe a little bit more of a grain of salt, because he's not your average defendant who has never alleged this before. But adding in the parent, unless maybe there was overwhelming evidence of abuse from the parents, then maybe I could see him needing to bring in the idea that he had his parents were unique abusers or something, let's say. But if they're setting aside that idea, I do think it's tough. We've covered a lot of cases where a conviction is overturned because too much evidence was let in. And so we could have gotten a conviction here that got overturned because once you tell the jury he's killed his father, does the jury really come back with an acquittal at that point, right? I do think that it's so easy to argue on appeal that you've painted this defendant now as a murderer, parent murderer, and he's not getting convicted of this crime. He's getting convicted because now he's a parent murderer. So that was, it's always difficult, as you know, to make these decisions, but he definitely erred. I think the judge erred on a more cautious approach. We were probably going to get here either way. I think if he allowed in the fact that it was a parent, that was probably likely going to get overturned.
No, I mean, you make excellent points that we do not in this country convict people over who they are. We don't even convict people over what they have done in the past that they're not charged with, really. Mm-hmm. We want them to concentrate, jurors, on the crime charged and whether or not there's evidence that they committed that crime. So I understand and appreciate everything you're saying. There's a danger there in them just saying, well, this guy kills his parents and I'm not going to, I'm not even going to really listen to the evidence. Otherwise, I'm just going to convict him. I completely understand that. But I'm also curious, what are those jurors thinking now, coming out of that deliberation room, picking up a newspaper on this case for the first time and realizing that that prior person was in fact his father? Just some mind-blowing stuff. Mm-hmm. It's a case that I don't think I'll be able to forget for a while. Couple of things that happened during trial, though, that may have turned the tide, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. The first was that Griffith's grandmother, so the mother of the victim, took the stand and testified on behalf of Griffith in his defense, saying that his own mother was abusive toward him. Do you think that kind of, I guess, incredibly personal witness, an own family member saying that this kid, in defense of this kid, do you think that may have carried the day for the jurors?
Absolutely. It takes it away from just him fabricating a defense to, especially a grandmother who's going to have cared, right, about the deceased, I think now, especially more than like decades ago, that there's a real understanding among jurors of how people who have been abused react in certain situations. And so I think that that kind of a testimony is very strong and may have overcome it, even if he had killed his father. I mean, for all we know, the jurors can be like, wow, the fact that he killed both his parents, that abuse must have been really bad, right? I mean, it could have worked both ways. I definitely think that helped him quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, last question on this. The prior case with his father, he wasn't acquitted of. They dropped the charges. So double jeopardy has not attached in that case. What do you think the chances are that prosecutors say, okay, enough's enough. We're going to go ahead and reopen our investigation, take a look at that prior case with his father, and maybe we do charge him again with that?
Mm-hmm. Well, as you know, prosecutors, I think what they hate more than anything is losing a case. If you ever talk to a prosecutor, usually the first sentence they'll say is, I never lost a case.
Right.
So I don't know if they're going to be wanting to pick that up so quickly. They did lose this case. The fact that they didn't take that case to trial shows that their evidence was probably not very strong. And what are they going to do? The same thing over again? And they see how that happened. So I don't know if they're going to do it.
If I'm a betting man, I say they do. I say that the overwhelming disgust with them feeling like this has been a miscarriage of justice, and like you said, they hate to lose. Yeah. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to say, you know what, you may have gotten away with this one with a jury, but we're not going to let you get away with the other one without at least taking our chances and seeing what a jury has to say about it. I don't know. I could be wrong. I hope they make a decision, whatever they do, based upon the evidence. But I just got a sneaking suspicion we're going to be hearing more about this case. But we will follow it. We will keep you all posted. But that is where things stand today, is that he walks a free man with two now dead parents.
It may be February, but most people are still doing their best to keep those New Year's resolutions going. If you're in debt, I have a great resolution for you to consider. Make this the year that you get on top of your finances. The first step is to contact PDS Debt for a personalized debt solution. If you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances aren't going down, PDS has the solution for you. Everyone with $10,000 or more in eligible debt qualifies, and there is no minimum credit score required. Bad and fair credit is accepted. Save more while paying off your debt in a fraction of the time. Being in debt can feel scary and overwhelming. So where do you start? How do you climb out of it? But remember, you're not alone. PDS Debt can help. Make this the year you take control of your debt. Get a free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/truecrime. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/truecrime. pdsdebt.com/truecrime.
Let's move along to Los Angeles, where the felony assault with a deadly weapon trial of hip-hop star ASAP Rocky continued this week, with the alleged victim taking shots at Rocky's attorney. Rocky, born Rakim Mayers, is accused of shooting at former friend ASAP Relli, born Terell Ephron, after the pair had a falling out. Mayers declined a plea deal that would have meant 180 days in jail in favor of taking his chances with a jury facing 2 felony charges with a possible max exposure of 24 years in prison. The defense has contended that the weapon used in the incident was a starter pistol, which was carried as a prop and unable to fire live ammunition. The state's star witness, Ephron, took the stand through several days of testimony, with Mayer's team implying that Ephron moved forward with the criminal case to help squeeze additional money from Mayers in civil court. In a heated exchange, Ephron told defense attorney Joe Tacopina, "You think you're slick," yelling, "You're not slick to keep tripping me up. You're not slick." Ephron was previously warned by the judge not to make inflammatory statements during the tense cross-examination. The alleged victim maintains that he was grazed by the gunfire and later brought shell casings to police, which weren't found when authorities initially searched the scene. How the alleged victim's outburst will affect the case remains to be seen, but all eyes are on the high-profile trial, with Mayer's partner, Rihanna, even making an appearance in court to support him. All right, Dina, the prosecution's entire case here, in my view, seems to be riding on the testimony of Terell Ephron. When you've got your star witness on the stand as a prosecutor and they start to lose their cool like this and get into it with the defense attorney, and to the point that the judge has to admonish him several different times, how do you think that's going to affect his credibility with the jury and the overall prosecution case?
Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't want to become the story, right? You don't want to become the story. It's a distraction. You start to, the jury, you don't want the jury to start to wonder if the victim is telling the truth, if it's credible, if this is just emotional, if this is retribution, and blah, 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 right? So it's tricky. Like in a typical situation, we would say the defense lawyer maybe should have been a little bit more sensitive, let's say, to the cross-examination of a victim. That's usually where we will always start out, because if you come across too strong, you're going to make the victim seem sympathetic. But in this case, the victim handled himself. I don't know if he made himself seem sympathetic. If anything, he made himself seem, like I said, like the story. And I don't think the prosecution was happy with that. It may ultimately not make that much of a difference in the eyes of the jury, but it kind of muddied the waters, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah, I think it even muddied the waters more than muddied the waters. Mm-hmm. I think it's a major problem for the prosecution. I mean, their whole case, I think, lives or falls with Terell Ephron, and they were putting a lot on him. And, he did well during direct and he did well during part of cross, and then the wheels just came off. And I wonder if that's when the prosecution's case may have fallen apart. I could be wrong. They could be a verdict and I'm completely wrong. But the other way to look at this, though, Dina, is the extensive cross-examination, hours of cross-examination, was intense. Could it appear to be badgering, and could it almost backfire on the defense, even though they feel like they got under Ephron's skin? Do you think maybe the jury will look like it? You're just beating this poor guy up, and this guy happened to have been shot by your client, and we're not going to buy it.
I mean, that's usually why, a defense attorney has to be so careful in their cross-examination, because it can definitely backfire and give more sympathy to the victim or alleged victim in the case. But I think his response, let's say he had broken out into tears, right? That's a whole different thing. But his response showed that, kind of fed into the defense's argument. And it showed that he has an extra grind, and he is doing this for, kind of a particular, that this is not just like a credible, I'm here to tell the truth kind of person. Like the fact that he had such an emotional reaction was exactly right what the defense was trying to pull out and look at. This is what we were talking about all along. So I don't think in this particular case, it backfired, let's say, in a way. Sometimes it can.
Yeah. Given the idea that the case has not gone very smoothly for the prosecution with Ephron's testimony, the supporting evidence is not what I would call strong. Yeah, I don't think this case, like I said, could survive on its own without him. With all of that in mind, and what you've seen thus far in this trial, do you believe that SAP Relli made the right call to decline that plea deal ahead of trial? It was 180 days. Myself and everyone who's a defense attorney that I talked to about it thought you got to take that any day of the week when you're looking at a couple of decades of exposure.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that is a sweet deal. That is for sure. Sweet deal. But they knew, like you said, the evidence that the prosecution had and didn't have, and how weak their main star witness was going to be. So I don't know. I'm conservative like that too. I would always say, why would you risk 22 years in prison? But there is a calculation that the prosecution's case wasn't very strong. And I think that's what's playing out. And you do just need the one juror to agree with that. So it's a risk, but it seems to be playing in his favor, I would say.
Yeah, you might be right. It might have been something that everybody was calling foolish, and he'll look like a genius at the end of the day. We shall see. That case is still going on. They should be having closing arguments soon, and we will give you guys updates as they come through. Now let's finally move to New York, where a federal judge has warned lawyers representing two Hollywood stars to refrain from making public statements to ensure a fair trial when the high-profile case reaches a jury. After the falling out of It Ends With Us co-stars Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni, attorneys for both parties have engaged in a never-ending series of accusations alleging defamation and even sexual harassment. The saga began in December with Lively suing Baldoni and his production company for sexual harassment and alleging that he engaged in a smear campaign to harm her reputation. Baldoni responded with his own lawsuit, accusing Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, of defamation and extortion while seeking more than $400 million in damages. With the quickly growing feud attracting national headlines, a federal judge insisted that both sides obey court rules regarding public statements to keep potential jurors unbiased. This was in lieu of a gag order as requested by Lively's legal team. Currently, the case is scheduled for March 9th, 2026, but could be accelerated if both sides continue to make fiery statements that might contaminate jurors. All right, Dina, jump right in. What's going on here? Where do you think things fall? Who's winning this, or if anybody?
Gosh, I don't know if anybody is winning the PR campaign right now. I'm just going to put it out there right off the bat because, evidently this PR campaign started, according to Blake Lively, around the premiere, smear against her. Then she seemed to be kind of winning it with her first complaint that she filed at the labor board in California. And then Justin Baldoni filed his own. And I don't know if they're going to all be dirty, let's say, at the end of this. I think they're pulling everybody down as a result of this. And so I'm not sure if anybody is going to end up on top. We are, a year out from the trial, if this trial ever happens. I think the ugliness is maybe just begun.
Yeah. And if it has just begun, good grief, because it's super ugly already to begin with. Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit more about who's got more to lose, I guess is the best way to put it in this whole thing. But before that, explain for listeners, if you can, this current issue in front of the judge. The Baldoni camp has been very active in bringing, the receipts. Mm-hmm. They say, you have accused me of this. Well, here's that text exchange. You say I spoke inappropriately to you during this scene. Well, here's all the footage related to that scene, to the point that Blake Lively's team has gone to the judge and asked for a gag order. Mm-hmm. The judge didn't give that, but the judge kind of admonished everyone to be cognizant of not affecting the jury pool. Mm-hmm. What are the rules about that surrounding public statements with these types of cases? And do you think the attorneys have crossed over the line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, the judge did warn them, like, you are getting very close to crossing over the line. I mean, they both have put out, there's a website, the Justin Baldoni camp has put out a website. Evidently, Blake Lively gave the New York Times the complaint in advance. I mean, they have both definitely made statements that will affect the jury pool. I mean, I think that's not even a question. But we are an open society. People are allowed to talk about lawsuits or things that they say that happened to them, right? And that balance between protecting the jury pool and kind of that freedom of speech always exists. And the judge really admonished them that you are getting very close and to be careful, otherwise to put a gag order. The attorney for Justin Baldoni is well-known attorney. He has represented, he has known to fight back against the studios for his clients. He had represented Chris Harrison when The Bachelor fired him. He represented Chris Cuomo when CNN fired him. He represented Megyn Kelly when Fox fired him, and got huge settlements as a result. He's known in the LA circles among the studios as like a very aggressive attorney that nobody wants to come up against. And so it's interesting. That's like another element that maybe us lawyers kind of know, because here you have Justin Baldoni really kind of also arguing that Blake Lively, because of her fame and her marriage to Ryan Reynolds, was backed by the studios, right? She was able to get her version of the movie made, all that kind of stuff. And here you have Justin Baldoni, with the hiring of his attorney and the way he's going after Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds, I think irreparably harming his association with any studio going forward. Like this for him is I'm going to die on my sword kind of case. The way he's going after them, the attorney he's using to going after them, the aggressive nature on it, he's going to have trouble ever having a studio role again, which is kind of an interesting side note, let's say. Maybe he already realized. I mean, the ugliness that happened in the filming, there was real ugliness that happened in the filming. Who did it, how they did it, all that kind of stuff. There were already people, the studio was already taking sides, right? They were already taking sides with Blake Lively. He may have realized he was already on the outs. And at this point, it's like, go big or go home. He's already not hireable. But I think that, and interestingly, Blake Lively has said that she doesn't want to get deposed by his attorney because of his reputation, which I don't think she'll ever be able to win that argument. Clients have a really strong right to get represented by counsel of their choice. But that's like a whole other level, kind of the behind the scenes, like lawyers, that I think is an interesting element to this as well.
No, absolutely. You make a point that I really appreciate about, and I've thought about it this way, that I think Baldoni did kind of see no alternative. He did feel kind of cornered and like, what else am I going to do? I'm either going to roll over and never work again, because the way everything is looking right now, I'm completely getting crushed, and they are so powerful and they are so connected, and all the studios are going to blacklist me just because of, Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds tell them to. And so he just lit the whole world on fire as far as he's concerned, and he's going after everybody, which is interesting because now, in my view, having my finger to the pulse of the culture as it is, that's a joke, but in my kind of limited view of all of this, I feel like the Lively and Reynolds have way more to lose reputationally. That at the end of this, and it's starting to seem that way, like they are really seeming to take the brunt of the reputational harm here. And it's like the studios and who they work with is one thing, but the audience and who people will go and watch is another thing. And don't you feel like there's just far more for Lively and Reynolds to lose than there was for Baldoni, and it might be doing them more harm?
Yeah. And it's hard to see it, to be quite honest. I mean, I'm on social media a lot. I post my videos, and the vitriol against Blake Lively right now is really intense, especially considering we are just at the beginning. I mean, they haven't even done like actual document discovery to undercover thing. Each side is posting things that are most favorable to them, right? And there's no testing of the evidence yet or anything like that. And the vitriol against Blake Lively to me is quite shocking, actually. When I saw the agreement that he signed, agreeing to do the things that he had been doing, some of those things listed were pretty gross. Things that females wouldn't want in their workplace. Coming in unannounced, staying there for hours, talking about her sex life with her husband, just inappropriate stuff. And then also that phone call that was released, I think it was released by him, was just creepy, And but people aren't sitting back and saying, let's wait and see, or sitting back and saying, this was maybe toxic on both sides. They seem to really be supporting him, which I find surprising based on so far what we've seen.
Yeah. I think it also demonstrates too that we're living in a time where celebrities and powerful people cannot control the narrative as much as they might have been able to in years past. In years past, I think that would have worked. You leak something to the New York Times writes some hit piece, and that person's done, and you move on. You wipe your hands of the whole thing and move on. But now with, Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all of these other social media outlets where people can, dissect this case and bring it up, you can see how it's not as easy, and they do not have as much control. And I do agree with you. The comments online express a lot of vitriol, but I think they also reflect people feeling like they may have been bamboozled or like they may have been tricked initially with the narrative that was put out there. But it is fascinating to me that a case that you would expect them to have kind of tidied up amongst themselves a while ago is just getting more and more inflamed as the days go by. And it looks like, we may even be heading to trial.
Or his initial PR campaign when the movie came out worked, and it stuck with people. And her being the one who was insensitive to domestic violence because she was wearing the flower dress, even though she was told to be wearing this flower dress, it stuck. You could also argue it that way. And her trying to say, like her whole complaint is trying to say that she was smeared. You can argue that it is, that it kind of, it reinforces her point. Once you are painted a certain way, it is very hard to overcome it. So, because I don't see, based on what's coming out, why she would be the one who has the vitriol compared to him, to be honest. I mean, I've seen tons of stuff about him that seems just as bad. But so you could argue that his initial PR campaign when the movie came out worked.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this. I don't know enough about it to give you the most educated answer on all of it, but I am sure that we are going to hear about it in the comments from people who have been following it very closely, because people are worked up about this one. It just really seems to have struck a nerve. But in the meantime, Dina, thank you so much for coming on this week. Always appreciated. Where can people find out more about you?
They can find me at Ask Dina Doll on all social media platforms.
Fantastic. And you can find me, I'm your host, Josh Ritter, on all social media platforms at Joshua Ritter ESQ. And if you want to hear my thoughts and coverage on even more true crime cases, you can also check out my brand new YouTube channel, Courtroom Confidential. And you can, of course, find all of our Sidebar episodes wherever you get your podcasts. We would love to hear from you. If you've got questions or comments you would like us to address, please tweet us your questions with the hashtag TCN Sidebar. And thank you again for joining us at the True Crime News Sidebar.